Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. If you heard that new intro music and you hadn't heard it before, welcome to the Shoe In Show Footwear Leadership Series powered by OrthoLite. In this special series, we sit down with top executives from the biggest footwear brands and retailers to talk about their shoe stories, talk about their philosophies and culture shaping how they do business every single day. These conversations, we hope, provide a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to lead in the world of footwear. A big thank you to OrthoLite for making this series possible as a trusted partner to over 550 leading footwear brands. OrthoLite continues to elevate comfort and performance across the industry. Matt, as we kind of tee it up, we've got a couple of these launched at this point. I love this series because we get to talk not about the nuts and bolts of our industry, which we typically do on our podcast, but we really get to talk about leadership, philosophy, ethos, like how we lead into constant change, right? So what is interesting is our guest today is leading a 175-year-old brand. So how do you like he doesn't look 175, but how do you lead something that's been around for so long? How do you make it fresh and meaningful both to employees that work there and the customers that buy it? And so I'm really excited to jump into this conversation today.
I'm very excited. Danny Ewoldsen, who is the president of Johnston & Murphy, which is owned by Genesco, is joining us on Shoe. And he's also a FDRA board member. So huge props for that. But Danny, thank you for coming on this program. And thank you for kind of diving into some of these leadership topics. Before we go down that road, we want to give people kind of the backdrop of the Danny 101. Now, I know you personally, and we're friends. I know like you have this big chunk of your life that's actually really interesting. I'd probably be more interested in talking about that than shoes. Yeah. So sprinkle some of those in because I know you're a music guy too. So walk us through how on earth you went from heavy metal 80s hair band to President Johnston & Murphy. Connect those dots, please. I need to know.
I lost my hair, so I had to find another way to make a living. Yeah, it's a long story. By the way, thanks for having me, guys. And thanks for all the great work you do on behalf of the industry with the FDRA. I just got to say that up front. Crazy times at the moment, and so good to have you guys out front. So thanks for that.
Of course.
Like any kid, I had hobbies and trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living. And, was kind of an athlete early on, and everybody kind of outgrew me. I'm 5'7", 150. And so I had to find something else. And a lot of music around my house growing up, and bought a guitar when I was an early teen and got real excited about it and started playing professionally really young, 15 years old, started playing around the Midwest and rarely went to high school on Fridays, kind of did Thursday, Friday, Saturday night shows around the Midwest. I grew up in primarily in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but we were close to Chicago and Minneapolis and St. Louis and Kansas City. So all these great places to go play. And out of high school, did it full time, went out to the West Coast and took a swing at it. And it was a really fun experience. And like a lot of people, eventually fell into retail, not part of my master plan, but that's how it happened, which ultimately over time led me here. But there's a lot to unpack in that story.
Were you in Sunset Boulevard in California? Like, where were you? Like the Whiskey Go-Go? Like, where were you at?
I wish it was that sexy. I had an apartment in Glendale. So, and then I shared with like two other people, and we spent most of our time, in a pretty shoddy tour bus, traveling the rest of the country where you could actually get paid to play music, which really wasn't the case in LA itself. But yes, it was during that time when Sunset Strip was happening, and all those bands that we all know and love from that period of our life were really making it. So yeah, it was a fun time for sure. There were some interesting things about the industry that I wouldn't recommend for the faint-hearted, but most of it was a really good time, particularly for someone that's 17, 18, 19 years old. What a fun experience.
Oh, I'm sure. Sure.
That's awesome. How about retail? How did that switch happen? Where did you start off in retail?
Man, it's one of the, people talk about that idea that there's a couple of days in your whole life that something happens that changes your destiny or your direction or whatever it might be. And
butterfly effect.
Well, what's that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had left LA and decided that the music industry wasn't going to be for me. And by the way, for a lot of reasons, I'll bore you with a couple. One was that, it's not really a meritocracy. It's so subjective. you could do everything right, work harder than anybody, and still never make it, right? And you would see bands that weren't maybe technically great that were selling a gazillion records, and bands that were amazing that they couldn't sell a ticket. And, you know, eventually you're like, am I really going to put all my energy into this thing that may or may not pay off, right? And so I'd left LA and I went back to stay with my dad just for a short amount of time in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And the idea was, I still had time. Am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? What's my next step? And I was sort of bored immediately. And I was talking to a girl that I'd met, and I told her that I was bored, and she said, "Why don't you get a job?" You know, and I'm like, "Well, I'm not here for long. And also, who's going to hire this kid with hair down to his waist, you know, into any position here in the Midwest, you know, in 88 or 9. And she said they hire long-haired guys at Chess King at the mall. And that literally was what I was told. And so I walked down there and applied for a job and got hired. And Andy, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Chess King, or Matt, you either, but
I remember.
Pretty fun men's clothing store a million years ago, eventually owned by Merry-Go-Round. And so anyway, I took a job as a sales associate. And then very quickly they asked me to be an assistant manager. And I decided that, you know, I might do this for a minute while I figure out my next step. That had turned into store manager. I was a district manager. I think by the time I was 21, it all happened really fast. I had no idea what I was doing. But I loved it. I loved being around people. I loved the idea that you got a report card every day, that, you know, what effort you put in, you got results from. I liked being around people. It was really a lot of fun. And you know, it took a minute before I said, this is what I do for a living. If somebody asked me back then, I would still say I'm a guitar player, you know, but then one day you're just kind of like, nah, I'm a retailer.
Interesting. But it was kind of serendipity that you went from guitar player, rocker, hairband guy to retailer to now running a 175-year-old brand in Nashville, Tennessee, of all places. So talk about Music City, USA, right? So like all of your loves are just churning in this big stroke, Nashville. And walk us through kind of what you do now. And in particular, some of our viewers and listeners might not realize, like Johnston & Murphy, the legacy of the company.
Yeah.
Making shoes for every president since Lincoln or
1850, all the way back to Philip.
Yeah, walk us through all that too.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, when Genesco called about the Johnston & Murphy opportunity, when I joined the company, you know, a little more than 20 years ago, it was as vice president of stores. I came in and ran the retail business initially. And what I remember about accepting the role and why I was so excited about it is, first of all, the heritage is unbelievable. You just can't buy it, right? It's so organic and authentic and real. And I would say that the brand was maybe a little tired and needed to be updated. And that's always the case with heritage brands. You're always working on keeping the brand updated. But the integrity of the brand, you know, was off the charts. The trust for the company from the consumer and from business partners, all that was so intact. Repairing trust is super hard work, right? And that wasn't the case here. It was really just come in and let's modernize this thing and see what we can do next with it, which is super exciting work and a really, really cool brand to work on. And so I was super pumped from the day that I got here. And you know, it's been a couple of decades now that I've been here. I guess I've been president for 7 years now. But this is such a collaborative group. I don't really feel like my title has changed much over the years. We just kind of work together and you know, against the same set of goals.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that in terms of you have a ton of stores across the country. How do you, as a leader, manage your time between being in the office and headquarters and making sure you're touching base with leadership and in the larger Genesco kind of world? Also, you know, operators at headquarters versus going out to the stores and talking to those guys. Because I think, you know, sometimes people think these leaders just sit in headquarters and they're making decisions and they don't go on the road, right? But like somebody who started, I'm assuming, from the storefront values it greatly to get the information and intelligence about how product may be translating to the consumer.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's so true. The value of spending time, you know, with your team in the front line and with consumers. I mean, you know, it's funny. We spend so much time crunching data and trying to understand what's happening with consumers. And ironically, you could just go out and ask them, you know, don't stand in the store and have a conversation. Yeah. You know, if a product is working or not working and you're trying to understand why through data, you can like call a couple of store managers and say, what's going on here? And they'll really quickly tell you what the story is. Right. And so in terms of the balance of how I spend my time, I would guess every busy leader at every level kind of goes home and says, I didn't get to all of it. Right. And I feel like, I'm giving attention someplace while I'm ignoring something else. And we have a wildly independent and capable team. Our leadership team is so experienced and so good. They certainly don't need me holding their hand, even remotely. I probably just get the way half the time. But it is really important to try to think about all of the constituents you have and making sure that everybody understands what the shared vision is and what we're trying to get done. And that means a lot of communication, and so you got to be in the front and talking to your stores and to your customers and your partners and all that to make sure that everybody's moving in the right direction. But man, I haven't mastered it. I don't know anybody that has. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is hard work. I mean, the other thing that's hard work is just understanding the consumer and the casualization of the consumer, right? Yeah. So Johnston & Murphy is just seen as a premium brand. It's one that when I was a little kid growing up in North Carolina, Virginia, my mom aspired for me to wear Johnston & Murphy to church and to whatever else. And now we have this super casual kind of society, but you guys have pivoted. You have some really great kind of casual hybrid dress shoes.
Yep.
Walk us through that process. How important is agility with a heritage brand, with a consumer that's constantly kind of changing its mind?
Yeah, well, I'll end with the last thing you said, and that's a consumer that's constantly changing, right? You can fall in love with your history and the DNA of the brand, and so much of that is worth protecting. But if you don't move with the consumer, you're just going to be gone. And if you think about, this is the longest continually operated footwear company in the United States, right? So there's very much a long view in around these halls on this business, and we want to stay relevant and we want to keep moving forward. And I think the most important thing we do is listen to our consumer and they let us know where we need to go, right? And so the things that are in the DNA, like we're hugely committed to quality products. We're hugely committed to quality service. Those are old tenets and old ideas, but they transfer across categories, right? So whether it's a dress shoe or a sneaker, you still want to be delivering great quality and great comfort and great innovation and premium materials delivered with great service by great partners. And so those things don't change. You hold on to the best of what you have been and what's got you to the dance, and then you continue to evolve based on what your consumer needs. It is so true that this idea of diversifying the Johnston & Murphy brand relative to product, that really has been the general strategy, even pre-pandemic. We talk a lot about diversification and really through three lenses. The first one is product, right? We don't want to be reliant on one category. Men's dress shoes have been in decline for 20 years. That's not a new idea. That's not just a COVID thing, right? It's been that way for a long time. So we really worked hard at diversification, but first through shoes. We today sell flip-flops to formal, so it's a really broad range. We have an amazing apparel business, and we've added additional categories as well. And then we think about diversification relative to consumer. We don't want to be reliant on just one consumer. Our reach today is really broad. I mean, we are 25 to 85 in terms of age range, and we're really, really blessed with a broad multi-generational consumer base. And the last way we think about diversification is really distribution, and I think more and more, that's one of the things that's changed the most, not just online, but all the places that you can buy product. And we're really kind of in the mindset that we just need to show up wherever our customer wants to shop. So I'm sort of channel agnostic. If we get it in our own direct to consumer channels, great. If we have success and acquire customers through our amazing wholesale partners, that's great. I'm happy to go wherever our consumer wants us to be. But one more thing, I'm sitting here today, I'm wearing our very best selling shoe this spring season is a sneaker. I'm wearing a white cub sole Anders sneaker. Who would have thought 20 years ago that our best selling shoe would be a sneaker? I'm wearing our socks, our denim, our belts, one of our essential t-shirts, and a J&M XC.
You're a walking commercial.
I am. I'm head to toe. And so that speaks to the diversification of the brand.
What kind of discount you get?
It's not bad. I wear a boy's medium, so I get a discount just on material. So it's pretty good.
Oh, man. Let me ask you a bit about workflow. So we talked a little bit about thinking about travel and balance and things like that. But you said something interesting, the data, there's so much data, right? My guess is you guys can probably look at your e-commerce at any point during the day to see whether you're up, whether you're down.
Sure. Yeah, that's healthy.
He's side eyeballing it right now.
Yeah, so. Probably is. Yeah.
I'm a big ticker over here.
Along with 401k, he's day trading and he's checking out the e-com at the same. I get it. I know how, multitasking. I get it. But I think I think the challenge is like not getting too high and too low on any given day is one thing. But also like, how do you work in this new kind of work world of some people may need Friday and they can work from home. Some people need to be in the office. Like, how do you communicate with your teams? Do you allow flexibility? Is there more return to work? Like, how are you guys managing this kind of environment?
I think versus, stringent rules, we try to be pragmatic from that approach, right? And you just said it, Andy, some people need to work at home and some people at times, and some people need to work in an office, and some people are productive in different environments, and for me, I love being around our team. My bucket is filled by that. I'm here every day and love being here every day if I'm not traveling for work. The majority of our team is that way, but we have a sort of a set policy where, you can work a day or two from home if you'd like. And if you need flexibility, to take care of your family or do anything you need to do in real life, of course, we're good for that. My perspective is, if you have a great team and employees that are really productive and engaged and doing a great job, it's our job to create an environment that they can be successful in and give them the flexibility they need. That has worked really well for us. I can't speak for other companies and what their needs are and what those roles are. Our product team is here every day. They're touching products, right? Yeah. It just kind of depends on what role you're in. There are other positions they don't necessarily need to be here. But I will say this, and this is just a blessing, right? We have a team that really likes one another, really supports one another. That we like spending time together, and so I think that's the best thing you can do is create an environment that people want to be around the team. And I think there's so much learning to be had as a guy without a formal education that just got everything I learned from being around people who are smarter and more experienced than me. I think that the people could really miss out on that opportunity if they're not present enough.
Yeah. Is that like, when you think about hiring in leadership or anywhere, is that kind of what you're looking at? It's like, we can teach you the ropes, right? We can teach you the nuts and bolts of what needs to get done. But if you don't fit within the team, and you don't have, you don't show up and you're willing to, learn and, all these intangibles that don't show up on a CV. Yeah. Is that what you're looking for sometimes?
Yeah, I'll answer that selfishly, right? My own opinion on what makes somebody happy at work, it's really not about what you do, it's about who you do it with, right? And if there is maybe the biggest benefit to being in a senior role is you get to decide who's on your team. And so if you're not happy at work, it's typically your own fault because you haven't surrounded yourself with people that you want to spend time with and people that motivate you and fill your bucket and all of those things. So yeah, it's definitely something I look for. Cultural fit is huge. When I was interviewing to come here, the president of J&M at the time was a guy named John Kaplan, who I learned a lot from. He was a footwear industry guy, and I did not come from footwear, so that education was important to me. I came from apparel and outerwear. And so, but when I interviewed with him, I asked him about the culture, and I had come to Nashville to meet Johnston and Murphy's team and the Genesco team. And in my mind, I had imagined this formal environment with suits and ties. It's 20 years ago.
Pocket squares.
Here to dress you. Right. It was all going to be fancy and pretentious and all that. And it was the opposite of that. It was so down to earth and so humble and so curious. And when I asked John specifically about the culture, he said something that I've never forgotten. And it sits in our brand book and we talk about values. And that is, we take our business very seriously. We don't take ourselves that seriously. Mm-hmm. And that, if there's no room for prima donnas around here, it just wouldn't work. We're quick to give each other a hard time in the hallway with a smile. And we really try hard to keep it fun. We just feel like we're more productive that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I think it shows when I've been in your showroom and the 1370 building in New York during Fanny Market Weeks. You're right. There's a camaraderie there. And half the time we're talking business, another time we're talking, 80s rock trivia. So, which I prefer, I prefer the latter than the former. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Danny. Let's say we're talking a year from now. We won't go through all the ins and outs of what's happening kind of out in the broader industry, but what will be a successful 25, 26 for you if you look back and say, you know what, I had these principles in place. I had these goals that I'd set for me and our team. And looking back, I was able to do it. And what does that success look like?
Yeah. I'll start with the consumer, which I always do. I think, this idea of the importance of growth and how do you grow and all the rest of it. I mean, you can think about growth through multiple dimensions. You can think about it through expanding your distribution or more categories or, regions, whatever it might be. But the reality is you can only grow your business one way, and that's through customers, right? And so you can develop a new category. Nobody buys it. Who cares, right? So I feel like bringing new consumers into the brand is the most important thing that we can do. And so if I think about whether or not we've been successful, I'll think about the reach of our consumer group, regardless of where they buy our brand or what category, but bringing more people into J&M. The thing that's really unique about this brand is that our consumers are unbelievably loyal to us. Everything we do in the way we think about executing product and service and policy and taking care of our people is really with that idea of loyalty in mind. And so we try to remove anything that would keep a consumer coming back to see us. We focus crazy on quality. We focus a ton on service. And everybody in our organization knows that they are empowered to help a customer, right? If there's ever an issue of any sort, you just take care of the customer. You just take care of them, whether it's a business partner or it's a consumer, because loyalty is key to us, and it's how you hold on to these relationships. We can acquire a customer at 25 years old and we can keep them for 50 years. I mean, that's a really unique thing to think about. So I'm really, really interested in growing our consumer base. The other thing I'll say about that is for a 175-year-old brand, our awareness numbers aren't through the roof. We have an opportunity to create more awareness. And I think part of that's perception. The longer you are something, the longer it takes to change somebody's mind about what you are. And our heritage, which we're really proud of, is 170 years of being a dress shoe brand, right? And then the last sort of, call it, decade or so, branching out in a big way into other categories. We know that, our consumers know that, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily know yet that we are more than just a dress shoe brand. And so there's still a lot of awareness and perception work for us, and that's exciting work, and we're spending a lot of energy on it.
That's cool. Interesting. I think it's interesting because in my mind, I would love to see a Johnston or Murphy shoe at a Fleet Feet. How interesting would that be? Where somebody goes in and looks for a running shoe, but then there's something where it's like you just went for a run and now you need to transition right to going out and et cetera, and having something like that. And I think that's where retail becomes really interesting if we can think critically and break down some of the silos we think of product categories. So that would,
I'm not interested in obviously in competing with Nike and On, but your point about being in other distribution or other categories, again, I'll go back to everything we do in our strategy is related to our consumer. We know that our consumer plays golf, right? And we have a big heritage in golf. We got in the golf business in the 1920s, left it for a while and brought it back, a few years ago. Because it's not a big disconnect. Like our guy, he's a business guy, he's a successful professional. He loves to play golf. Why would he not wear our brand out there? And so, I'll be playing golf hopefully this weekend. And once again, I'll be head to toe in J&M from my polo and my shorts to the golf shoes. And so it's not, out of bounds to think about those extensions, Andy, at all.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I hope the person that you pick up at 25 can make it past 75. We've got Ozempic now. We've got all these new drugs. So who knows, right? We're talking about getting to over 100 years. So there's your growth right there. Anyway, try to sell that to your board, Danny.
I'm going to bring you with me. It's going to be
helpful. We need to lean into healthcare, so we got the customer for longer.
Right.
So now we're going to transition to some footwear fun as we kind of wrap up this episode. A big thank you to OrthoLite for sponsoring this series and help us bring these great conversations to life. As a reminder, OrthoLite partners with over 550 of the world's leading footwear brands, elevating comfort, performance with every single step. You can learn more about their incredible work at ortholite.com. They're also at many of our events. Their leadership team attends many of our events and engages with a lot of people in our industry, and it's very giving to 210, to FDRA, and many other groups. So not just about providing great product to footwear companies, but giving back to the footwear industry as well. For this fun footwear game, Matt gets to choose.
That's right.
What he's going to throw at you. And
I'm nervous.
Sit back and watch as usual.
Nervous.
I'm Gen X, and that's what we do. We really don't lean into anything. We just sit back in the lawn chair and see what happens.
I am too. So Danny, remind me of the name of your band that you toured.
I will not.
Okay. All right. So,
I'm keeping everybody off of YouTube.
Okay. All right. So here we go. The Will Nots are getting a reunion tour back up together, and you're going to be going back on the road. And for your final show in Cedar Rapids is like a return, like a homecoming.
Right.
You got your acts picked out. You know what you're going to be playing. You got your set list. What shoes are you going to be wearing for that final show?
Yeah, I was always a boot guy on stage. Loved to wear boots. And so I'd probably be in some awesome vintage J&M Chelsea boot.
I like it.
Wow.
Is that what you wore when you were actually touring?
Oh, not Johnston and Murphy back then. I got my first pair of J&Ms when I was in my 20s before I worked for Johnston and Murphy. But no, I was, I actually used to buy a lot of boots down in Mexico and I would wear some of those. And they would be crippling. I'd be in such pain by the end of the night on stage. But I needed them for two reasons. They needed to look cool. I needed to be a little taller. So they were pretty helpful.
Your fingers were bleeding. Your ankles are sore. So
yeah, I wasn't really that good either. So it was kind of rough now that I look back.
Yeah, when you have those lifts, do you call them the DeSantis? Is that what that is? Where you get the platform and it gets a little higher?
I never start lifts, but I understand. Yeah.
Oh man, Danny, really appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit about your perspective and your leadership styles, because we are doing the series because we think, in these, I won't say troubled times. In some ways, they are troubled times, but challenging times, uncertain times, for sure. Leadership matters more than ever, and philosophy and ethos, principles help us get through these times. And we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your perspective in particular. And 175 years, it's fun to hear you talk about the new iteration of product that you guys are launching out there in the midst of that. And I think, and just having your footprint out there too, right? Like you are online, dynamic online, but you have so many stores out there too. So, so not easy managing all those channels.
Yeah. But
I love to hear your flexibility to do it and say anything that we can do to make a customer happy. I'll say this one thing, like I did when I was in high school, I worked at Chick-fil-A, right? And my boss told me one time I was interacting with a customer who wasn't happy about their chicken sandwich, which happens. And so I talked to the customer, gave them a new sandwich, they walked away. And it seemed fine. And I turned around. The operator was like, "You could have done that a lot better." And I was like, "Oh, like, what did I do wrong?" He was like, "You didn't come out behind the counter and actually just stand there like a person to person and care about what they were telling you." So I think having that and like leaning in with the customer first mentality, I learned so much from that. I was shocked that he told me that, but it's made a big difference in how I interact with people and provide service.
That was your butterfly effect moment, Andy.
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, I love Chick-fil-A. I always crave it on Sunday for some reason, but
my wife does too. You got to stock up on Saturday nights. Remember and
smart. That authenticity is just massive in leadership and relationships, all of it. And what your GM was trying to tell you in terms of going eye to eye with the consumer. We have an unbelievable consumer. Like our guy loves to joke. He loves to have fun. He's a successful, articulate, but he's a self-made guy. This is not a luxury brand. That's not what we're aspiring to do. Our guy is a pretty self-made consumer. And he comes to us because he wants us to help him with his confidence. He wants to be at his best, whether he's, in the office or at a barbecue or whatever he's doing. And he really does trust our team to help him with that. And, and we take that trust very seriously. And, our team does a really nice job of being on that consumer's level and understanding, what their needs are. We feel like we're doing more than just selling shoes and apparel, right? We feel like we're really helping a guy be at his best and feel at his best. And they understand that from us. It's a really nice quid pro quo and a really good relationship. But I do think it is that authenticity thing.
That's cool.
That's awesome. Well, folks, that wraps up another episode for our shoe and footwear leadership series powered by OrthoLite. We thank you guys for listening. If you go to shoeleaders.com, you can get access to the stack of great conversations that we have some more coming out. And of course, if you just are subscribed on shoeandshow.com, these episodes will drop strategically through that. Just listen to the change in the intro music, a little bit different hype. We like to have that.
A little bit more rocking.
A little bit more rocking. Yeah, a little bit more hype for the leadership series. A little elevated, but we appreciate it. Next Monday, Shoe-In episode drops. I'll tell you what, please tell your colleagues about Shoe-In Show. Please tell your organizations. We think that we are having really valuable conversations that help the industry think a little bit differently, hopefully act a little bit differently too, provide better customer support, think a little bit differently about product as we lean into these uncertain times. And we certainly appreciate you guys listening and now watching on YouTube and other channels as well. So with that, until next time, Shoe-In.